Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Naomi Parnas, the co-founder of KPW Communications, a former journalist for CTV News Toronto, and a Unity Committee member, and I am very proud to be the host of this very timely and much-needed event brought to you by Unity Through Sport in partnership with UJA Federation of Greater Toronto. These are two tremendous organizations that are committed to combating anti-Semitism and offering unwavering support to the Jewish community. Anti-Semitism Through the Eyes of Sport brings together some of the most influential sports figures to discuss anti-Semitism and its significant rise across the world. It's also meant to bring comfort and strength to a community that is suffering and often feeling very isolated right now. This is a reminder to the Jewish community that you are not alone and that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. I'd like to introduce you to our panel moderator, Emily Austin. Emily is a sports journalist, broadcaster, influencer, and strong supporter of the Jewish community. We pass this on to Emily to introduce our panel and get started with this amazing event. Enjoy, and thank you again, everyone, for tuning in.
Hey everybody, I'm Emily Austin. As she just said, I'm a sports personality and a huge advocate to combat anti-Semitism, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. What I'm not excited about is that we are experiencing a huge rise in anti-Semitism, and it's very concerning to everyone. The Jewish community is under constant attack every single day, and anti-Jewish hate is growing exponentially, especially on college campuses, primarily in North America. And because of this, so many Jews feel like they need to hide their religion to avoid being a target. But that's why we're here. Members of the sports community have the ability to inspire and shape attitudes, because sports is a beautiful thing that can bring people together on a neutral ground where we could rise above our differences and put them aside and find the common denominator. We can break down these boundaries that set us apart and work on something together. So this exceptional panel of Jewish sports personalities is the perfect reflection of this. And we came here today to give some comfort to the Jewish community, and we also hope to raise some awareness to other communities as well. So without further ado, I will now introduce our esteemed panel. From the Edmonton Oilers of the NHL, Zach Hyman. MMA insider and multiple-time winner of the MMA Journalist of the Year, Ariel Helwani. Former MLB All-Star and current co-owner of Greenfly, Shawn Green. NHL insider and journalist from Rogers Sportsnet and NHL Network, Elliotte Friedman. Lastly, influential sports lawyer, author, and podcast host, Darren Heitner. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
So my first question for the panel is, the Jewish community has a very long and strong history of supporting movements like the Civil Rights Movement, the NAACP, same-sex marriage, but oftentimes we're not supported by other groups when we need it the most. Why do you think this is the case, and what do you think we can do to change this? Anyone could just pick up what feels like saying something.
Okay, I'll go first, Emily. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go off the board a little bit, just talk a little bit about my family history, if that's okay. I was always very close with my grandparents, on my mother's side. They were survivors. My grandfather was born in the Polish town of Krusznowice. He had a wife and I believe a daughter who was 2 that didn't get out alive. My grandmother was born in the town that we now know as Auschwitz. She was in the Warsaw Ghetto. She got married in the Warsaw Ghetto. Her husband did not get out alive. They met in Bergen-Belsen, and they started a new family. They had 2 daughters, and if all of that wasn't enough, their eldest daughter died of cancer on her 35th birthday. They went through a lot. But they didn't let it ever change who they were or define who they were. They still lived their life. They were great people. They were 2 people I was very close with. And the one thing they always said to me was, we're not going anywhere. And I agree that these are very challenging times. I can't believe some of the stuff I've seen over the last 2 weeks. And they always told me, or they always acted polite but firm. They were great people. They were nice people. They spoke at different denominational events. They went to churches to speak. They they said you treat other people well, and you don't, and you show up every day. And I just think, Emily, when I look around and I see what's going on right now, nobody is getting away unscathed. The level of hate out there for everybody is enormous, and it's more visible than I think it's ever been. And so a long way to answer your question is you support others, and if they don't support you, which you hope they do, then you make it very clear that we believe in ourselves and we're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Emily,
I actually think that you see the way, with especially the recent events, brands, the way they're reacting, dropping the celebrities, Adidas and others. I think a lot of celebrities, Jewish celebrities that usually maybe kind of stay out of the politics, the kind of religious spotlight, have stepped forward and on their social media. So I think that maybe that was the case in the past where there was less support. But I think now, particularly because of social media, more people have individual voices. Brands are so powerful in building the celebrity status and obviously the wealth of a lot of these people that maybe are kind of stepping on other people's feet and are critical of other groups, like has been the case in the recent Kanye saga. I think by cutting out the wealth, the legs, and having the other celebrities step forward and show support for the Jewish community, I think it actually is changing now.
But I do think, Emily, that the premise of the question is accurate, that there's this feeling, at least, that Jewish people are not as supported by other groups when you compare it, as you mentioned, to, I believe you said, the civil rights movement and same-sex marriage issues. And I think it's a byproduct of people's perceptions. And I'm stating this generally. Obviously, this isn't true for everybody, but you look at the individuals affected by those specific movements, and I don't think anyone would argue that these were people who were disadvantaged and who had depressed situations where it was very simple for people to gather around and support those people in their specific movements. I think here there's less of a movement, but there's this ongoing anti-Semitism that is very real. And I believe, again, this is general and it's not true for everybody, but at least looking in the past few weeks or past few months, as we've seen a more visible rise of anti-Semitism and a confidence in individuals to express their anti-Semitic beliefs, I think you see a lot of people look at it, view it as wrong action, but not feel as compelled to vocalize their support for the Jewish people, because they may internally believe we're not as disadvantaged as other sects of individuals. And I've seen that again in a lot of the commentary and responses, even to my own posts on social media and otherwise, that there's this feeling that we don't need the support because, again, there's this general belief that we're powerful already. Yet look at the numbers. Obviously, Jewish people are still a minority in the United States globally. And I think that there's just this wrongful perception as to our global power, despite perhaps many Jews being influential in politics, business, etc. And thus a lot of individuals feeling as though they don't need to be as active, to show that activism as they would in the civil rights movement with same-sex rights, etc.
Tremendous point from Darren there. I was going to say the same thing. I think that people don't view us, even though we have often been the underdog, people don't view the Jewish people as the underdog. And so they don't feel like they have to go to bat for us when these issues arise. I do think it is a dangerous thing, and I try not to do this anytime I talk about this issue and talk about anti-Semitism. One thing that I hate about social media and our current society is whataboutism. And so when people say, but what about this and what about that and what about that? Well, right now we're talking about something that is affecting us. And so I try not to compare how people, treat Jews or whether or not they go to bat for us the same way when, you know, Black Lives Matter was a very pertinent and important topic 2 years ago, we all got upset when people were like, well, what about, you know, white people's issues, and what about, you know, this person's issues, and we would always make the comparison, well, if you go to a breast cancer foundation, you know, fundraiser, you're not talking about colon cancer, we're talking about breast cancer right now, and right now we're talking about people's views towards Jews, anti-Semitic, you know, hate, rise, all that stuff. And so I try not to compare, like, well, how come people in these other, you know, these other races, groups, genders, creeds, whatever, why aren't they sticking up for us like we like to stick up for other people? That's I think a dangerous game to play. And I think we have to, you know, worry about how we can fix this. And ultimately, as some, you know, I'll, you know, like Elliotte's incredible story, mine is nowhere near, you know, as heart-wrenching as yours, but my family came from the Middle East. My grandparents were kidnapped by the PLO in 1980 because their neighbor wanted their jewelry store, and they were kept in prison for 8 days until a friend of theirs who knew Yasser Arafat made a call to get them out of jail, and then they moved to Canada, like my mom and my dad. You know, my mom used to go to school, and people would throw rocks at her growing up in Beirut, Lebanon. So it's a very personal thing. And you know, when I was working for ESPN not that long ago, there was a fighter, I cover fighting, named Gina Carano, who made a comparison on social media to being a Republican in 2020 to Jews living in you know, Germany, in Nazi Germany. And I didn't speak up about any of the other stuff going on, but once it was a fighting issue, I talked about how this was an insane comparison, and how this could be offensive. I didn't want her to be canceled. I didn't want her to be, you know, kicked off The Mandalorian, which she eventually was, the Disney show. But I just tried to explain, someone who I had a great relationship with, why this was a very dangerous comparison to make and had nothing to do with what, you know, Jewish people went through in Nazi Germany. A couple days later, the president of the UFC, man by the name of Dana White, brought this up unprovoked. No one asked him about my commentary, and said, did you guys see what Ariel had to say about Gina? What a douche. What a douche for saying what he said. Now, I'm a Jewish person talking about how Jewish people should react. Could you imagine 2 years ago if a journalist for ESPN who was Black brought up something that someone said about George Floyd, and Mark Cuban or, you know, Adam Silver called that journalist, that Black journalist, a douche? Could you imagine the uproar, right? No one said a peep when Dana said this about me. And so the reason why is we don't need that backing, according to them. We don't need, you know, we're not the underdog. We're successful. We're rich. We control Hollywood. We control media. That's the way people think. So yes, I know I just kind of answered the question, even though I said it was a dangerous question to talk about, but I just wanted to say that to back Darren's point, which I agree with 1000%. People don't view us as the underdog. They don't feel like they have to back us. And I felt that 2 years ago when I was called a douche for trying to explain why that comparison was a very insulting one.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Ariel. And like you guys, like Elliotte said, like I have my grandparents, one of my grandmother, on my mother's side, she's still alive. She is a Holocaust survivor. So I come from Holocaust survivors as well. And I grew up very much in a Jewish community, went to Hebrew day school, went to Jewish high school, so learned about the history of the Jewish people and the importance of the Holocaust. And I think as we move further away from the Holocaust and further away from the survivors telling their stories, I think it's even more important that we're here and, you know, bringing it up and talking about it. Because even though I think culturally we're so tight and it seems like we have a large voice, when you look at the population, we're still a small group of people, and the amount of hate that we get in comparison to the number that we are is pretty dramatic. So I think when we talk about why there isn't as much support for the Jewish people, I think it comes internally as well. I think the more we talk about it and the more we bring it to the forefront, I think that's a powerful thing. And I think the UJ and Unity setting this up and having us all here, I think speaks volume to, you know, what we're trying to do to convey to all the people watching who are, you know, feeling the hate and feeling isolated and alone. So I think that this is just a great event and happy to be a part of it.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I'm honestly just very sorry you each have to deal with these things, being a personality in sports and entertainment. But to take it a step further, there's another topic which people seem to shy away from, and that name is Israel. My question for the panelists is, what does Israel mean to you as a Jew, and why do you think so many people in this industry and just in general have such a negative viewpoint of our Jewish homeland?
Well, I think Darren hit on a big thing there, and that is that whether rightly or wrongly, I think we're not, like, for a long time, I think we were seen as the underdog, and now I don't think we are anymore. I think that has a lot to do with it. I'm wearing my Israel cufflinks right now. I don't know if anybody can see them, but my sister lives there now. She's raising a family there. We've been about 10 times. I really love the country. We're not perfect, but I love the country, and I really believe in it. And I just think, look, I mean, like, every time there's a conflict, there's always going to be people who see things differently, right? And it's just not until there's peace. There's going to be people who like what we do, and there's going to be people who like Israel, and there's people who aren't, and it's never going to end. And I just think it's never been easy for us, and it might never will be easy for us. But I think I believe in the state. I believe in its promise. I believe what it's accomplished. I believe in where it's going, and I hope someday in my life there'll be peace there. But I recognize what Darren said, is that people will see us now as the successor, and therefore that's not always the side that's going to be supported.
Yeah, and I think that what people don't realize, at least from the outside, is there's only one Jewish state in the entire world that's predominantly Jewish. That people who are Jews can go there and feel at home, right? Every other country you live in, you're the minority, right? So I think that's something that's really powerful. It's been a refuge for, especially after the Holocaust, for people who are misplaced their homes, their families, lost their families, didn't have anywhere to go. They're able to go and start a new life there. And I think now, even for people who are in countries that still have persecution and things like that, they can go to Israel and feel safe and at home. So I think that's a powerful thing. And I think from the outside, even living in North America, living in Canada, I think it's so important to support the Jews that are living back there, just because we have so many connections to there. Like my wife's grandparents, they're Holocaust survivors also. They left after the war and they went to Israel, and that's where they had her dad. So there are a lot of connections, I think, that everybody who's not living currently in Israel have to Israel, and I think it's so important that we continue to support it.
Yeah, I was actually sorry. I was saying I was actually a player coach in the World Baseball Classic about maybe 9 years ago for Team Israel. And what was amazing is I've still never been to Israel, and I still felt this as a Jew, this strong connection. And there were some Israeli players. There's a lot of American players that were playing in the major leagues, minor leagues, and it was just a really tight knit, kind of this unspoken connection. And that's what Israel, I think, means to a lot of Jews. I mean, I would imagine a high percentage of North American Jews have never been there, but you feel this connection to it, and it's pretty special. I can't think of anything that's analogous with other cultures to, it's like when people ask, oh, what's your, when I was younger, before they knew I was a Jewish baseball player or whatever, they, what's your background? They say I'm Jewish. It's like, what other religion says that as like more of a cultural or geographical answer to a question? And I think that's what sets Israel and I think the Jewish culture apart.
I'll say,
Emily, I'm sorry. I just want to say too. Sorry, Darren, to cut you off, but the other thing I just think it's important to mention is, in the last few years, Israel's made treaties with countries I never thought I would see happen in my lifetime, and that's why I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful that we're heading into a better direction. Sorry, Darren.
No. Thank you. Much like the other panelists here, many of the other panelists, a lot of my family perished during the Holocaust. My grandmother survived, and with my grandfather, was able to get out of Europe and move to Israel, where my aunt was born, before they then moved to the United States, where my mother was born. And for me, as a Jew, Israel means a lot of things, but it always will mean that there's a place of refuge. You know, the Holocaust being only 80 years ago, yes, I think it was Ariel who mentioned it, or maybe somebody else, that, or maybe it was Zach, that it's been so long and there's so few people who can tell the stories. There are even deniers of the Holocaust, obviously. But what if there is another situation similar to that? I know it's hard to theorize or believe, but it's always possible. And to have somewhere to go to in the worst case scenario, I think adds a lot of comfort. It's just one flight away, worst case. I personally think a lot of people have a negative viewpoint of Israel, probably for two reasons. One, they've never been, and hopefully, Shawn, you do have an opportunity to go one day. I never had a true appreciation for Israel until I went for the first time. And it's so hard to describe because I can't even explain what it was about touching down and spending a week or so in Israel that changed my whole concept. Beforehand, I didn't think it was so special. And being there and going back, I definitely understand how unique and special it is. And I think a big reason why a lot of people have a negative viewpoint is simply that they have one source of information, and it's curated media that oftentimes doesn't tell the true story. And they have nothing else to rely upon unless they actually go visit the country, which is not so far away. It's an easy trip on El Al. So I think that's the big problem there. Just like I talked about initially about a perception of the Jews, the perception that we're so powerful that we're not the underdog, as Ariel mentioned. Well, there's a perception about Israel that's very wrong, that the media has constantly hammered into the general public. And unless you go there, you really have no appreciation for how special it is.
I'll just quickly add that I feel very strongly about Israel, and it really hit me. I kind of took it for granted. I went to a Jewish day school, and so it's around you. You're kind of living in this bubble. But I went on a trip called the March of the Living in 1999, which I'm sure all of you know about, and spending a week in Poland and then going directly to Israel. That's when it truly hit me. I don't know if there's a couple days that go by that I don't think about that trip and the things that I saw on that trip, and then to go to our home. I agree with everyone. Like it's just a reminder that this place needs to exist, and the stuff that we saw on the March of the Living happened not that long ago. Again, I'll make it a little bit personal about MMA because I think it's a real problem in MMA, and often I feel like I'm on an island, and I don't know if it's because of the fan base or the fighters, but there's just one Israeli fighter in the UFC right now. His name is Natan Levy, and he just fought this weekend, coincidentally. And he was asked about the Kanye West comments and whatnot. And I know anytime I talk about him or a previous Israeli-born fighter named Noad Lahat, the amount of hate that I would get is insane. Like people write to me, Zionist, like that's a bad word, like that's an insult, like you are a Zionist. And so all I did when he won, I tweeted Shavua Tov with an Israeli flag, and he had a great performance. The amount of hate that I got for that tweet was insane. I mean, it's deflating. And you realize that a lot of people that, are part of this community that I'm very proud of, the MMA community, think nothing like me. And in the spring of 2021, when we saw this real rise in anti-Semitism, it was incredibly disheartening to go on social media and see colleagues of mine and fighters who have a lot of respect for, put the flag and rat emoji and death to Israel and all this stuff. And I was like, man, I thought we were buds. And this is how, like, what do you even know what you're talking about? And as Darren said, they get these 15-second clips on Twitter or Instagram, and they like, look at the bad, Israeli army, look what they're doing, look how evil these people are. And of course, this whole thing is way more complex than a 15-second clip on social media. And they throw out these words like, apartheid and genocide and all these things that they don't even understand what they're saying, but it has become en vogue to make the Jews into the bad guys and, the other side into the good guys. And as I've said many times, I don't know a single Jew that doesn't want peace in the Middle East. I don't know a single Jew who roots for any of this. But yet, we're the evil ones, and we have to kind of take the arrows for, whatever decision the Israeli government makes or the army makes. Like, we're just people who are trying to, hope that everyone can live in peace and harmony. But yet, we get this hatred. So it's a very complicated thing. And it comes down, I think, to, the way we live now with social media and the way these clips get passed around and get regurgitated and just like, in these bite-sized forms, and look what they did, and they don't see, the context, they don't understand it, they don't know the history. And so that's why I think this is growing with the rise of social media, the rise of these clips, the rise of this misinformation. And it's incredibly dangerous and incredibly disheartening, but won't shy away from ever talking about it, won't shy away from ever tweeting about it, won't shy away from telling people I put my tefillin on every morning, even though 99% of my audience has no idea what the hell I'm talking about. I won't shy away from calling, fighters mensches who are good people. And now I see like non-Jewish fighters using that term, and that gives me great pride. I'm trying to like seep that into the subconscious of the sport, because there's just a lot of hatred out there. But I think it's very important to continue to support Israel. And if people want to call us Zionist or me a Zionist, I'll wear that badge pretty proudly.
Boy, Ariel, you make me feel like less of a Jewish person by telling me you put on your tefillin every morning. Now I feel completely
Come on,
useless.
every morning since 13. My dad asked me to, and I made him a promise.
That's amazing.
I
Good
think
on you.
one of you touched on a really important point, which was just misinformation and people maybe just not being educated. But more and more, we see celebrities like Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, Ice Cube, etc., using all these old age tropes and these myths and spreading misinformation when it comes to the Jewish people. So do you guys believe this is merely ignorance? Is there something deeper we're missing here that we should be more concerned about? What do you guys think about all of it?
I think, I mean, I can speak to the Kyrie point, because just as an athlete, you have this platform where you have so many, you're always taught when you come into the league, whether, it's the NHL, NBA, NFL, MLB, whatever it is, as a kid, you grew up and you watched these athletes and your role models. Like my role models are like Matt Sundin, Darcy Tucker. And when I became an NHL player, I always thought about the kid that I was and how much I looked up to those athletes, and whatever they would say was would be what I thought, like what I would do. What Matt Sundin did on the ice, I would try to do on the ice. When he would say something in an interview, I'd watch the interview. So I think as an athlete, you have this platform, and it's a powerful platform, and what you choose to say on that platform doesn't just affect you, but it affects whoever you're talking about, because you have millions and millions of people who are following you, idolizing you, watching you, trying to be you, and they're taking what you say on your social media platform as what you truly believe. And whether you believe that or not, it doesn't really matter. Once you put it out there on social media, it becomes your voice. So to the Kyrie point, I don't necessarily know or think that he necessarily believes these things. I think he's since apologized, but I think that you have a responsibility as an athlete to make sure whatever you put on your social media is what you believe and truly vetted. So I think from that point, it was concerning, because you're spreading these anti-Semitic tropes, and you have this new generation that idolizes you and that follows your every movement, and that will maybe look at it and say that's okay. And then they go to school and they have Jewish friends, and they're relating what they saw their favorite athlete or favorite musician say, and that's a dangerous thing. So I think as as panelists, like I think it's important that we speak up about those things and whatnot. I think Kanye is on a different level, and I think somebody else can touch on it, but he's kind of lost his mind a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the social media is like, it's a scary thing. When you look back to World War II on all the propaganda, and there were new-ish mediums. Film was relatively new. TV was just emerging. And when you think about social media, I retired from baseball in 2007, and social media wasn't even a thought. Like I would have never posted, Twitter or anything started in 2007. So that's how new it is. And I think it's done a lot to just contribute, especially in the US, but globally, to the polarization, in so many different ways. And the thing, when you have some of these folks that are saying anti-Semitic things, I mean, I think you could write some of it off to the lone nut having, amazing megaphones to be able to speak. And someone that has 10, 20, 30, 100, 300 million followers has, more influence than the New York Times in a lot of ways. Like, it's amazing how much influence these individuals have. And when you have some people that have crazy ideas or anti-Semitic or racist, whatever it may be, there's now a humongous platform. And that's what's scary, because it's just going to get worse. I think that from an anti-Semitic standpoint, but all polarizing issues out there, and we have to figure out really how to handle the social media beast that it's just like the genie's out of the bottle. And I think the same reason it's created a lot of these issues, and I think just expounded these issues, it's also probably a vehicle to make things better, as to kind of expand on what Zach was saying. It's like, as an athlete, you have these crazy platforms now that never existed in the history of humanity, and to be able to have people step forward and say things, and Kim Kardashian stepped up after the Kanye and made her statements. I mean, she has hundreds of millions of followers, so things she say matter. And so I think athletes and teams and leagues, they need to educate the players even more so. They need to support the players to stand up and denounce crazy theories, crazy ideas. And it's what's kind of created this is the same vehicle that's going to be needed, I think, to help kind of right the ship.
Yeah, I agree. What Shawn just touched on, I think, is what's most concerning to me. If you look at an individual who has tens of millions of followers, traditionally, at least 10 years ago and beyond, that person would have had to go to Elliotte or Ariel to get his or her word out, to get the message and spread it across states, countries, across the world. And now it's just so simple. With literally the click of send, you can transmit a message to tens of millions of people who can then share it to all of their followers. Before you know it, the impressions can exceed 100 million. And then Kanye tweets something and people go and stand above a bridge and hold up signs about Jews, and go to Jacksonville for the annual Florida-Georgia game and display very demeaning commentary about Jews on buildings on the actual stadium where the game was being played, so that the teams had to come out and transmit their own messages on social media explaining that they denounce those acts. But I think at the same time, these tools that empower individuals like Kanye to disseminate this information empower all of us on this panel, everybody who's listening, and I think to an extent obligate us to respond and inform and educate the general public, because there are so many people, and what I'm most concerned about is the youth, who look up to many of these celebrities, athletes, influencers, and can have their positions changed by what these other people are saying. I mean, asking whether it's ignorance, I think it's very hard for any of us to opine on that specifically. I don't know how much time Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and others have actually looked into it. I know Malcolm Gladwell says you're not an expert until you put 10,000 hours into anything. I doubt any of them have done so. It certainly comes across as ignorance, but whether it's ignorance or not, I don't think is the real question. The question is, should we be concerned about it? And I think the answer is absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that leads, very well into the next question. And I have my own thoughts about this, which I'll share later. But what do you guys think about all these people who say, the Jewish community is not fighting enough, our community is too soft in combating anti-Semitism, and people are having a lot of excuses for why we're not fighting back with stronger language and speaking up more. And we touched upon it earlier on how people tend to shy away, whether it be for their career or social, whatever it is. What do you guys think about that response, that we aren't doing enough?
Well, I would say I think that's a tough thing. Everyone needs to be comfortable with whatever they're doing, whatever they're saying. And I would never point the finger at anyone and say, you're not doing enough. You should be more vocal. You have to be comfortable, because as we talked about, there's a lot of vitriol. There's a lot of toxicity. It's not a very comfortable place, and we're often on an island. I would also say that I hope that people who, especially in this sports world that we're talking about right now, I hope that the few, major league Jewish athletes out there, such as you, Zach, know how, and I'm sure you do, like how influential you are to young kids. Like my boys and my daughter go to a Jewish day school, and there's not a lot of people like us to look up to. I can't even believe I'm on a panel right now with Shawn Green. You were my Sandy Koufax. Like, we wanted to beat you. I grew up in Montreal. You played in Toronto. You were a huge deal to us. And what you stood for, and the fact that you were open and proud about your faith was massive. We could count the amount of Shawn Greens that I had, in my childhood on one hand, less than one hand, right? So I hope that the people who are in these positions, who are athletes, who are superhuman, who play alongside the likes of Connor McDavid or any other great basketball player. There's very few of them, but I hope they realize just how much power they have just by a statement. Like Julian Edelman, I hate the Patriots. I despise the Patriots. I'm a proud Bills fan, but I freaking love that guy. Every time he puts out a statement, he nails it. He's unbelievable, and he does it with such grace, with such class. And so, like, he's one of my favorite players, no longer playing, but I just think he's such a great role model. And so we often get it right when we speak up. It's just there's not a lot of us out there. And I hope that the people who are in these positions are comfortable enough and realize that there's a bunch of people who support them, even though there may feel like there's more who are against them.
I don't think you can fight every battle, Emily. You can't. But the one thing that I do like a little, like recently, is that Kanye West faced real consequences for what he said. And Kyrie Irving faced real consequences for what he said. And like Nike and him just split up, and Kanye lost his Adidas deal. You have to fight the big battles, and that's why you hope for organizations like UJA that they will get behind the group and they will help fight the battles for the group, because a united voice is more important than a bunch of us just screaming. And that I think consequences are important. I think the story that Ariel told about the hate he got when he sent out that tweet, and Ariel, you still did your show the next day. Like, you didn't go anywhere. I used to have a couple people, there were 3 or 4 of them, they were coordinated, that used to send me a tweet. This was years ago. I don't know that they're still doing it anymore. But every time I finished a segment, they would send me a tweet that said, every time I see you on TV, I wish that Hitler had finished the job. I used to get, those are a bunch of people who used to send me that. Now, I'm not going to report them to Twitter. I'm not going to scream about that. It's 3 or 4 anonymous accounts. I know some people are different, Emily. I understand everybody's different, but it was 3 or 4 anonymous accounts, and they didn't have a lot of followers, and it's clear they were just doing it to that. Like, you cannot let losers like that get to you or beat you. And that's why I think the most important thing is, like, Ariel, like, your lesson there is the best. You showed up the next day. You didn't go anywhere. My grandparents always used to tell me the greatest victory is living. Sometimes we're going to have people that hate us, and sometimes we're going to have people that say things to us. The greatest thing we can show is that we're not going to cower. We're going to show up the next day, and you're not getting rid of us. I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but I really do believe that.
Oh, I muted myself. Nobody asked me, but I'm going to share my own thoughts about this.
Please do.
Let's just say you guys are better than I am. I feel like we need to be proactive, not reactive. And unfortunately, I found that the Jewish people tend to react more, and we tend to condemn Kyrie and Kanye when push comes to shove, which is fantastic, as we should. But I think the main problem is we're never proud of our identity until we have no choice. We're never proud until we feel like our identity is being threatened. And my question to my community members as a Jew is, why is that? How come you weren't proud a week ago? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's more of a rhetorical question, but that's how I feel. And to everyone watching this, and I'm going to share my own clips, if you don't want to be a voice, what Ariel did say, which I agree with strongly, you need to be comfortable with what you say, and you have to be true to yourself. If you don't feel like saying something, that's your own decision, and you have to respect it. But if you don't want to be a voice, the least you can do to contribute is amplify the voices that are willing to be a voice, such as Ariel and everyone on this panel. If we're going to be the voice, retweet, comment, like, because you know what it is? This social media war reflects how people feel in real life. And today, we mentioned earlier, you get most of your information from social media more than our politicians. I scroll on TikTok like, Mom, did you know this? Did you know that? Did you know that? I'm getting information from it. Which, now my tangent is over, leads to my next question. What do you think we can do as a sporting community to combat anti Semitism better? How do we make this world a little bit of a better place?
I think it comes back to, what we were talking about earlier. I think social media is such a powerful medium right now and doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon. I think is to have really strong strategies on how to reach the kids, right? And as you alluded to or discussed TikTok a little bit. I mean, I have two older daughters now, but my younger one's 17. She's on TikTok all the time, and she's like just like you, she gets information there. And I think the more that people that they admire, the kids, and you're not going to, I just don't think you're going to really change, a 40, 50, 60-year-old's mind too much, but the kids you can have a lot of influence on. And that's the goal is to create a better world, to leave here with a better world than we've come into. And I think sports, I think obviously celebrities, whatever kind of influencers that kids are focused on, they need to be the ones to kind of spread this message. And I agree with others on the panel. It doesn't have to be, I was the type where I was never really political when I played. I just kind of always tried to, say the right things and stay out of any controversy. And that's just my personality. But, it's at the same time, I was proud to be Jewish, and when the high holidays came, I sat out and, that was my way of making a statement, is trying to, quote unquote, do the right things. And as Zach said earlier, be a good role model for kids, because I knew what it was like as a kid to just idolize someone and then read something in the paper that they did that was, they had an affair, or they did this, or they got caught with drugs. And so I never wanted to be that type of person. And so I think there's different ways you can be an influencer and lead. But the people that do want to get out there and do want to have their voice heard need to be armed with, I think, the right content, and organizations like UJA, like, they could help, I think, by arming the people who want to lead, the influencers that want to lead with better content and better knowledge on how to hit those points that they need to hit.
Emily, I laughed when you said that you get your information now from social media and you share it with your mom. I feel like my mom gets the information from social media and shares it with me. But with regard to what we can do to fight back more aggressively on anti-Semitism, I think my esteemed panelists here are in a unique position because they have great followings and they have the mediums to speak proactively and more generally. But I think the challenge and where the fight needs to be held is actually more so in private life and in private affairs, where every single Jew, if he or she spots anti-Semitism, and as long as you're not putting yourself in a dangerous or harmful situation, talk to that person, educate that person, inform that person that you're no different than he or she is, and that you're just practicing your religion, and that all these tropes, all these theories about what Jews are and all the negative perceptions of Jews, that they're just not true. And I think we all need to be a bit more proactive in our private affairs and I think the word pride and being proud was mentioned before, whether it be by Emily or maybe Ariel. I think that's super, super important. And one thing that I don't think has necessarily been mentioned yet is not to live in fear. That is the absolute worst. If you live in fear, if you're ashamed of your heritage, if you're ashamed of being a Jew, and you allow this type of propaganda to be used against you and the Jewish population, we're just inching closer and closer towards the 1940s. We need to be proud of who we are. We cannot live in fear. And I think outside of, again, this panelist and athletes, celebrities who have such a large following, I think we just need to be a bit more proactive in our private affairs and explain to our friends that we're no different than they are at the end of the day inside.
And I would just add that I think we need to continue to educate people with class and grace. And I'm not a big fan of cancel culture and things like that. I don't think that if you make a mistake, you should be wiped off the face of the earth. But again, going back to Julian Edelman, who has been, put in the forefront a couple times in situations, regarding Deshaun Jackson in the past and whatnot, like, we're trying to educate, and we're trying to teach people that the Holocaust did happen, that we're not the bad guys, that we're not the enemies, that we're trying to defend ourselves and all this stuff. And as opposed to just trying to, demand that Nike drop Kyrie. Well, why don't we try to educate people and the people that he's influencing that this isn't the way to be, this isn't the right way to think, as opposed to just running for, repercussions and whatnot. I hope that when people are judging us, they say that when we are being, attacked via words, via commentary, that we handle ourselves with class and grace, and that we don't just try to fight back by canceling people or doing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think it's important that we get rid of this narrative that it's us versus them. And I feel like that's what things have become recently. It became a battle. It's us or you, instead of just trying to find the common denominator and unite. And I wanted to ask everyone on the panel, was there a time in your career where you felt personally attacked by anti-Semitism?
I can jump in. I think growing up, I was always probably one of the only Jewish kids on my team, maybe one or two on my team. And I think as a kid, kids say stuff without necessarily meaning it or understanding what they're saying. And that's, I think, going back to the Kyrie Kanye point, like, kids can take stuff from what athletes are saying and just say it and regurgitate and repeat it without really understanding it. So as a kid, I think I experienced it more so than I did now as an NHL player. I think now, especially on the ice, I think I don't experience any anti-Semitism, and I hope that nobody else experiences any racism or anything else. But as a kid, I definitely experienced things that made you feel like you were alone or isolated because you were the only Jewish kid on your team. So, and I hope now that, as we continue to progress, that kids who are like me, who are Jewish, who are playing and who excel and are maybe the only Jewish player on their team, they don't have to experience that, or they can kind of, see other successful Jewish athletes and see that they can make it and things like that.
Yeah, I had, over, I would say 16 years professionally, I had 3 instances that stand out in my mind. One was before, I was I just got called to the big leagues, and one of the guys on the team was talking about someone else. I go, oh yeah, it's because he's a Jew, and he started making comments about that, not knowing I was Jewish. Another time in the minor leagues, a teammate was calling me a Jew boy, and I said, haha, that's funny, and it kind of kept going, and then, the words kind of escalated on both sides, and then the third time was in San Francisco. I was playing for the Dodgers, and obviously there's quite a rivalry there, a lot of hate, and I was getting a Heil Hitler sign from a guy who happened to be bald. I don't know if he was a skinhead or what he was, but I got that. And as an outfielder, you basically get abused for the hour and a half that you're on the field. The other hour and a half, fortunately, you're sitting in a dugout, so you're safe, but you're getting abused, and that really upset me. Obviously more than other times, but I would just get sad. I mean, it just made me sad. Like, I don't know why someone would have so much anger that they'd come out there and feel like, even if it was like a 13-year-old kid just heckling me, it's just like there's just so much anger out there. And when someone comes out doing the house, and I could still picture this guy's like smug smile as he's doing it, knowing that I can't really do anything. I'm on the field. I could tell the usher, which I did. I don't remember if they got him out of there or not, but yeah. So it was just it's crazy that all the years playing, like I could picture the guy, I could picture that moment because it elicited enough emotion in me. But 3 events that I really remember over 16 years, I think is pretty good. And a lot of my teammates dealt with a lot more. I played with a lot of Asian players, I played with a lot of African American players, and they dealt with it, I think on a more significant scale. So still, though, anytime you're hearing that, it definitely leaves a mark as it did on me.
I would just say as a reporter, like I talked about some of the stuff I got on Twitter before, but dealing with players, and I dealt with both Zach and Shawn when they were in Toronto, I actually thought that the athlete from the players, I almost never got anything about religion. Like if Zach or Shawn or their teammates ever hated me, it was because I said something dumb about them on the air or I asked a really stupid question. And I always liked that. That's one of the things I've actually really liked covering about sports is I think a lot of sports is can you like a lot of sports is as capitalist as it gets. Can you be good at what you need to do to be successful? And I think a lot of that goes for I mean, Ariel, you can say if you disagree, but I think a lot of our business is about are you good on the air? Can you bring an audience to the people like you? And I think that comes down to not who you are or where you come from. It's can you do the job? And I have to say, covering athletes over the years, that's some of the least uncomfortable I've ever felt because of where I come from. If I, like I said, if I ever felt uncomfortable, it's because Carlos Delgado saw me say something on TV the night before, and he's like, "I'm getting you today for what you said yesterday."
Unlike Zach, unfortunately, I feel like I grew up in a bubble with my Jewish day school friends, and now that I'm a grown up living in the real world, I have received a lot more hate than I ever did. I didn't even know any of this really existed when I was a kid, and so as recently as Saturday, tweeting out the Israeli flag. I mentioned the Dana White story, which was really upsetting, and still to this day, people don't really understand why I was so bothered, and honestly was very bothered by how my employers at the time handled it, which was by doing nothing, and only only sent me a text asking if I was okay 3 days later when like media reporters started to talk about this. But there was a fighter who's still in the UFC whose parents are from Palestine, and he told his manager that he thought that I wouldn't like him or want to talk to him because he was from Palestine or repped the Palestinian flag when he walked out to fight. And so there was a media day, and I walked right up to him. All the fighters were available from that card, and I walked right up to him first because I wanted to show him that I didn't care about any of this, and I really don't. And I was like, "Hey, man, nice to meet you." I mentioned what I had heard. I wanted to tell him that not true, all this stuff, and we did an interview with him, and that was all fine. Over the years, though, like more and more things would come up with this fighter and other fighters who are kind of associated with him. And so I told the story on my show around a year or so ago. Someone asked me, why don't you have him on the show? And I was like, well, he said this to his manager, and I kind of felt like he didn't want to talk to me, all this stuff. And he put out this whole statement saying how it was incredibly offensive that I would say something like this to him, not mentioning the part about what he had said first to his manager. And I felt like he tried to, kind of turn the gun on me, like I was the bad guy. Didn't talk about the time that I walked up to him and did the interview and told him that wasn't true. And so like there's times like that. And then I got a ton of hate, like, oh, you hate Palestinian people, you hate this. I was like, what in the world is going on here? This is very, very weird. So I feel very much in my sport like I'm on an island. It's unfortunate. There's a lot of fighters from the Middle East. There's a lot of Muslim fighters. There's a lot of fighters who are very open with their hatred towards Israel and Jewish people. And there's not a lot of people sticking up. So I wish there were more Natan Levies, and hopefully as the sport continues to grow. But it's a weird time, especially in MMA. It's a very, very weird time. And perhaps this feels very fresh because it was literally on Saturday that he just fought, and I felt it. Yeah, it's very weird. I hope it goes away, but I'm honestly not too confident that it's going to go away anytime soon.
I'll just say, fortunately, in my profession, I haven't experienced a great deal of anti-Semitism, and I show off my Judaism very proudly. As you can see, I wear my chai. I send all my pictures that I post online. I started a website about 17 years ago called Sports Agent Blog, covering the sports agent industry. And for years, when I was actively writing, every Friday I'd have a Shabbat Shalom Friday wrap up. And yet, even displaying my Judaism, I never really confronted it, except one time sticks out to me, and I won't mention the client's name, but I do a lot of work with athletes as their legal counsel. And I recall sending an invoice and receiving something to the effect of, all of you Jews, all you care about is money. And needless to say, I didn't represent that client much longer after I received that reply. But I think that is certainly a stereotype that we deal with a lot of times, which is that all we care about is money, when obviously the opposite is true. And so that's the one time that it sticks out to me. But fortunately, in working with so many different athletes across a broad spectrum of sport, I have not dealt with what Ariel has, very unfortunately. And I certainly feel for him. And hopefully, at least in the UFC, it gets better. I mean, Ariel, one of my clients is Malki Kawa, obviously, different religious beliefs, and we're like brothers. I've never heard about the type of treatment that you've received, and I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm going to be following that going forward, and I've got your back.
Thank you.
Before we go, I wanted to thank all of you, especially all of you on the panel, for being so vocal and being so proud to express your identity. Obviously, besides the scrutiny that some of you will be receiving at times, I think it's very important, and I hope that you guys can set an example to everyone watching, everyone following you, everyone that was a little bit hesitant to start, being proud of their identity. And I think you guys are really great role models for everyone, especially as athletes working in sports, being in that public eye. You guys represent us Jews very well. So I want to thank you all firstly. And second, to everyone that's watching, we do have a role to play. We have to speak up. We have to stand up. We have to be proud of who we are before it's too late. And, fortunately, there's no lack of organizations to get involved with. If you don't know where to start, you can reach out to everyone here on this panel. You have UJA, which we can thank for this amazing panel. You have Unity Through Sports. There's many amazing non-profits that you can get involved with. And, just do it. Don't think too much about it. If you want to start somewhere, just take the first step, no matter how big, how small. And thank you all for being here, and have a fantastic night.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.